Hey, it's John. I am going to outline the next session for you in Journalism 3130. Before I do, I just want to say thanks for the assignments that were turned in, and one comment, which you won't see on my feedback when I do send it, is almost all of you decided to write a pitch with a family member, and most of the time that family member even has your last name. And I understand, particularly in these times when COVID is, restricting where we can go and how we can do our lives and what have you, that and oftentimes the stories that are closest to us are those of relatives, and so they're accessible at a time like this. But I'm going to warn you that even though in this class I'm not going to make a big deal about it, two things. One is, in the real world, editors are going to say, I don't want stories about your relatives unless you really make it clear why you're the person to write this personal essay. It's not journalism strictly to write about family members. It's very difficult to convince any editor that a family member is a story that you can approach objectively, meaning like that you can absolutely track down the facts and that you can't be biased toward their side. In a personal essay perspective, those are fair game. They happen all the time. I write about my mom, I write about my grandfather, I write about some long lost relative, I write about a brother. That's absolutely fine, but just realize that that's a personal essay. That's not a straight up magazine story, and you're going to have to work extra hard with your editor to convince them that this is a good story to do. I'm not going to belabor that anymore, but I am going to say avoid any more in this class and in the next 3 assignments that you have to do over the next 3 months. I would avoid using family members. I won't approve any more family member content. And again, I'm not mad. I'm not. I'm just saying, as a practice and a service to you as your professor, I just think it's a disservice to keep you writing about your family. So you have to think outside the family entirely, outside your friendship circle. You can't write about bosses. You can't write about coworkers. It's just not good practice in journalism. So this person has to be removed from you as we move down to the February project. So just consider what you've done so far as a January primer on where we're going to go, okay? And so in January, what we really got our arms around, and I don't, you can take the next few days off and not have to worry about the next session till, I'm just suggesting like Monday, you pick this class back up if you can. But the month of January was some time off at the beginning of January, a lot of immersion into great storytelling techniques, all of which are germane to journalism and matter as you develop as a storyteller. So all of those things that you read in week 1 should be circulating in your brain as great storytelling, and some of those things will stick with you the rest of your career. In session 2, you began to look at, concisely and briefly, making your point, making an argument for your story, kicking off a story with a really compelling introduction so people will stick with it. And I'll give you some feedback on how you did. Now you get into session 3, which is the month of February, basically dominating. You're going to have several sessions. I anticipate 3 sessions this month. Each session will get you closer to where you will be at the end of February. So really your next writing project isn't due till the end of February. You have a month to think about how you want to approach and report out a very important component of this class. I haven't looked back at the syllabus, but I believe I set out that there are 4 writing assignments. This is the one that I really think is going to be an intensely compelling but also demanding assignment. So you'll see in Moodle that I've assigned stories and podcasts, not podcasts, but speeches for the week. The story by Brian Mockenhop is personal to me because Brian and I know each other very well. Brian actually helped me teach this class about 10 years ago. And I got to know Brian. Brian is one of the best journalists I've ever met. He does extensive work to publish one story. And you'll see in Escape from Kinross, the story that he wrote about prisoners who almost did it, almost got away, that he didn't just, recreate the story from news clips. He didn't just hash what other people were saying. He didn't do one interview and write about it. He didn't interview the warden and write about it. He engaged in a long, extensive, and dangerous for the prisoners exercise of letter writing back and forth to get the story. That's immersive journalism. That's what I want to introduce to you today. The two words that you need to write down in your notebook are immersive journalism, because that's the month of February for you. And that's what you're trying to accomplish, is something that reflects immersive journalism. He immersed himself, submerged in the story, basically dunked himself in the tank and put himself in the shoes of the prisoners and did his darndest to learn what they did in their attempted prison break back when that happened at the Kinross facility. It's no small feat of journalism, A, to do what he did in reporting, and B, to accomplish what he did in writing and publishing the kind of piece that he did. It's a fantastic story. And first thing is, read it, and just think as you read it what Brian had to go through in the letter writing and in the back and forth in the research to tell this story as cinematically as he possibly could. He had to immerse himself. And one thing to note with this is, as you read it, you realize that he could have done this during coronavirus. Okay, this is one of the reasons I assign this, is because it's easy to say, well, it's coronavirus, I can't go do immersive journalism because I can't go experience something like Ted Conover in the Sing Sing story that I'm going to introduce in a second. Brian did this from an office, right? He wrote letters back and forth. I mean, that's very, very possible to do. Now, you're on an accelerated timetable where this week you need to decide, what can I immerse myself into? And then you've got a few weeks to immerse yourself, and then you've got some time to write about your immersion. And don't worry, you're not going to write it finished at all. You're not writing a finished magazine piece at the end of February. I want you to document what you're doing in your immersion. As you dunk yourself in the tank of a story, you document every single thing that you are doing with exhaustion, to the point where you're like, do I really need to write down that I called and didn't get through today? Yes, you need to write that down, because I want to know the steps that you're taking to learn this art form, because it is the best kind of journalism that you can do in 2021, because everybody's doing commodity journalism. Everybody's writing about a company called GameStop today, okay? Everybody's writing that story. You're taking it further and saying, I'm writing about things that are going on in the world that I actually have to experience to write about them. And that's what had to happen with Kinross, is through the eyes of the men who tried to escape from prison, Brian tells this outstanding story. Hopefully I've sold you on reading it, because it's wonderful. The thing you need to realize is that as you read this, these men got in serious trouble for collaborating with Brian after the fact. The warden and the police and everybody who kind of runs the prison system read it and were like, what the heck were you cooperating with? You made us look stupid. It wasn't an inconsequential piece. So, he convinced these guys to tell their story. He told it raw, objectively, made them look a little dumb, made the prison system look really dumb. He was objective. He was removed. These were not family members. So that's the first thing, is read Brian Machenhof's Escape from Kinross. Read it. Apply it to your brain and think, how tough was this? The second thing for this week, for this session, is then to study Ted Conover. Ted Conover wrote an outstanding book about Sing Sing prison in New York and his time there as a warden, or as a CO, a corrections officer, working for the warden. And I love the book. I've read it twice. I love Ted's work in general. I love the way Ted tells stories on The Moth. That's why I want you to listen to those stories that he tells on The Moth. And then I want you to read, again, with an eye on how difficult it would have been. This man uprooted his entire life, quit journalism, went to work at a prison with the intent of writing about what life was like inside Sing Sing. And you're not going to read the whole book unless you really want to. I think it's a wonderful book. I think it'd be a great contribution to your journalistic pursuits. But you are going to read a very, very hefty snapshot of what Ted came away with at Sing Sing. And again, this is different, way different than Brian. Brian got into the prison by way of letters. That's more likely the kind of journalism that you're going to do in the media. Ted quit his job, went to work at Sing Sing, and lived it. Lived life as a CO for an extended period of time, walked away and wrote about it. There are different things. He made it very clear when he took the job at Sing Sing that he was a journalist. He didn't say he was writing a book, but they knew on his application that he was a journalist. And then he took exhaustive notes about that, and you'll hear him talk about that process in those Moth interviews. So finally, let me get to what you're thinking. Or what you're going to be doing this week on Friday, the last Friday in February, which is the second is Tuesday, Thursday is Wednesday, February 5th. If I've got my days wrong, the first Friday in February. By the first Friday in February, I want you. So you need to kind of listen to this stuff. And by the first Friday in February, you know what? Let's make it the second Monday. So I believe that's February 8th. By the beginning of the next week, so the second week of February, that Monday, I need you to tell me what your immersive project's going to be, because that's when I want you to have the wheels moving. I'm going to immerse myself in something. Let me give you some examples of immersion that I would be thinking even if I was in your shoes. There's a story that's circulating right now. I mentioned it earlier about GameStop, and everybody on this call probably knows what GameStop is. We're all familiar with the fact that you've got to get video games, and GameStop's always been a place to get them. GameStop has not done well over the last several years. It's not done, there's a lot of things that people are doing other than buying used games for their gaming needs, or even new games, and maybe some of you know the story better. But GameStop it's stock trading on the Wall Street on Wall Street on the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange, where they trade stocks, has done extraordinarily well. The company's not doing well, but the stock is. And what's going on are there these people your age and older, but they're trading stocks in their free time, and they've basically talked up the value of this stock to the point where it's way more than it really deserves to be. If you look at this picture behind me, the picture was probably $100, let's just say, at Crate & Barrel. My wife bought it for me in 2003, and I've always had it hanging on my office wall. It's just a replica. It's not a big deal. There's nothing important about it. But, let's just say the artist behind it wanted to just jack up its value and started making things up. And it went from $100 to $300 to $600, and people are like, I got to buy that painting before it goes to $1,200. That's kind of what's going on with the GameStop. It's kind of a worthless stock that a bunch of people are saying is worth something, and all of a sudden it's worth 700 times more than what it should be. And this has made Wall Street, the traditional traders on Wall Street, very angry, because that's not the way things are done. I could see an immersive story about somebody who is doing the trading that is making this thing. So using Robinhood, for instance, it's an online platform to trade stocks, and risking everything to make this kind of money. It's a get quick rich scheme. I could see, sort of the anxiety and living with that person for a month or 6 or even 3 weeks. You could say, I'm going to live with this person via text, via email, even going and visiting them, using all the proper safe and social, distancing mechanisms that you need to do. You need to stay safe, you need to stay healthy, but you need to have proximity to this person who's trading, who's basically buying stocks on the hope that they're going to get rich quick. If you spent 3 months or 3 weeks with that person, and at the end of February said, here's everything that I learned. It's basically, it'll be the first week of March, you're going to turn into me a journal that says everything that I learned, and I'll walk you through how to do this journal. Everything I learned from this person, I think it makes a great story. Another one would be working at a restaurant in February. You could go get a job at a restaurant and not, who knows how many hours. Maybe you already have one. This would be a great immersive project for you. Even if you work at a restaurant, I would approve this, because I would approve you saying, I'm going to look at it through the eyes of a journalist, as if I'm writing everything objectively. I'm not friends with the cook, or maybe you are the cook. I'm not friends with the cook. He's my subject. I'm not friends with the manager. She's my subject. I'm not friends with the waitress. She's my subject. I'm not friends with the guests. They're my subject. So they become part of your story building process, and you see them through the lens of like, how would the world need to see these people? It'd be fascinating to be in a restaurant in the month of February, because they've been shut down for 4 or 5 months or 3 months, and it's like the reigniting of this thing. How difficult is it? People come in, are they cautious? Are you as a worker cautious? That's an immersive journalism project that you could put into the Detroit News or Our Magazine or where some online resource at the beginning of March and say, I spent a month waiting tables at Big Boy, just FY, Panera, whatever, and this is what it's like. This is what it's like. That's the most important thing that you come away with is these men tried to escape from Kinross prison. This was what it was like. This is what happened. This is the drama that unfolded. There's another one that I is close to my heart. I like Oakland University basketball. I might have talked about this before, but I could see trying to do an immersive piece on what it's like to be a college freshman basketball player when there's nobody in the stands, when it feels like nobody's paying any attention to you, nobody's watching. They're having, I think, a pretty good in-conference season. And, to get to know that team, like talk to Greg Campy and say, my professor wants me to do an immersive journalism project in the month of February. Can I have 3 weeks to just be part of this team? He might say yes. And again, it would be fascinating because there's such a big interest group, including me, and that leads right into March Madness, right? So it'd be a great time to publish the story about like the dog days of February when the college basketball season is dragging on and on and on, and nobody's in the stands and nobody seems to be paying attention because this is a mid-major, and if you're not going to the games, like how much fun is it? And right from the perspective of a player, or right from the perspective of the manager of the team or the coach of the team, like what is this like? You're immersing yourself, you're dunking yourself in the story. There's all kinds of things. I think about my church, what it's like to be the priest of our church at a time when he can't serve communion and he can't, fully. He can't. There's a lot. He can't always give last rites. Like what is that like? A month doing that. The key here is that you have access, that you can be objective. So you're not going to your father's car dealership and telling what a wonderful man he is. My dad was a car dealer. You're not going to your brother's, climbing gym and writing about what a wonderful climbing instructor he is. You're writing an objective. You're reporting out. You're only reporting out, and you're documenting your reporting on something you can be objective and that you have incredible access, more access than the average bear. So, like, Brian writes letters to these prisoners. He's doing something that the public's not doing, which is interacting with men in prison over letters. Ted goes and works at Sing Sing. Well, he's the only journalist working at Sing Sing. That's incredible access. So you're looking for unique access into something. I did an immersive journalism project on rally car racing many years ago. I was driving the rally cars. Okay, so like that's something that my readers may do on their free time, but many of them did not. So I was the conduit or the proxy into this activity as the immersive journalist. What it's like to spend a year on this, no-name American rally tour, driving these rally cars to the forest at 100 miles an hour. What was that like? My access is what made that story matter. So your access matters. And if you have questions on this, just shoot me a note. Be like, I don't quite understand, how this fits. Your access, and then you have to have it's got to be interesting. Like, don't bore the heck out of me. I think another thing is that came through in the original, in the first assignment is, were you thinking enough about the reader's time, or were you thinking more about a story that you would just conveniently tell? The stories that you can conveniently tell are not compelling usually. They're good. Sometimes they're magical because they don't take a lot. But usually it's saying, I got to put down some sacrifice here if I'm going to tell a story that people really want to know about. It's going to mean some degree of work and pain. And so you ask yourself, how interesting is this project? Is working at a grocery store for a month interesting? I'm not saying it's not, but where's the interesting angle? How am I going to compel people to want to do this? You think about that from a movie standpoint. Movies about ordinary things are just boring. But if those ordinary things can kind of be positioned and angled as extraordinary, bam, you got yourself an Oscar-winning, performance. So access and objectivity, and it needs to be of interest. It doesn't need to be super timely. It doesn't have to be about coronavirus. You don't have to have proximity. You don't have to go somewhere every single day. You can write letters and do it through email. I prefer that within, proper social distancing and safety and all the things that you need to do to kind of maintain your health. I prefer that you you have some movement in your reporting and that you're actually going somewhere. But I understand in the month of February when COVID, numbers are still high, like that's something I can't demand that you do. But yeah, I mean, think about that. So interesting, access, objectivity. If you have more questions, let me know. On Monday, the second Monday in February, you're going to send me a note. It doesn't have to be long. This is my project, and this is why I think it's interesting, how I think I have access, and how I'm going to be objective. It's interesting because here's my access, here's how I'm going to be objective. Interesting because here's how I have access, here's how I'm going to be objective. It has to hit those three things, okay? Or you're going to be graded down. Thanks. And it all goes into the cumulative grade for your second writing project, which is this is your project. You're going to be writing it through the month of February, and then at the beginning of March, it's going to land on my desk. Okay. If you have questions, let me know.